So on that note, welcome to the September 18th, 2020 edition of the Domain Social. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can join us at thedomainsocial.com. You can subscribe there through the mail form. You can email me at info@thedomainsocial.com. Twitter address is there. Facebook is there. LinkedIn is there. And yeah, again, so you can subscribe at thedomainsocial.com. So the agenda has changed a bit. Now we're starting an hour earlier going forward. So I will open the door now at 3 o'clock, and then we'll have I put 3:20. I knew it would be long today, but I didn't think it'd be this long. So, let's start with the, news and guidelines about the specific show, and then recording will start, and we can talk about everything. For those of you who haven't seen us before, we talk about incoming offers. We talk about recent sales. We talk about what you've bought recently, the industry news, trends. If you have any general questions that you'd like answers about, technical things with registrars or anything else in the industry, it's all, there's nothing set in stone. Around 4:15-ish, because sometimes we're way off. I'm not going to stop a good conversation. We're going to start with the auctions and this new fixed price plus segment, which I will explain when we get to it. And then I'm assuming that'll probably take half an hour, 45 minutes, or whatever it takes. Might take a little bit longer. Now we're talking domains in further detail, but then 5 we'll go back to whatever it is. And now I will do a hard stop on recording at 6:30 or whenever that topic winds down at 6:30. And as some of you know, we've been going till 11 p.m. Eastern, sometimes even later with the after party. And I think, I need a little bit of a break. I need time to get my other stuff in order. So I'll do a hard stop at 8 p.m. Might be earlier, but that'll be the new limit. And that's that. So on that note, anybody selling domains? Anybody getting any offers they want to know about?
I got a sale. So I sold a domain to IBM unknowingly. It was docwatson.com, which, the more I think about it, I should have put together telemedicine and their AI platform. But it was a nice little offer and I accepted it. So it was a very nice thing to have happen.
$100.
What's that?
$100.
Yeah, that's where they started, of course. They start very low. No, it's one of those where GoDaddy contacts you and then, kind of walk you through a process. So it wasn't, going to put any kids through college, but it also, was much more than the cost of a sandwich. I'll have to leave it a little bit vague.
But, like wholesale, it's an important part of our industry, right? Liquidating our domains when it comes time to, some people get that crunch of they need to pay for renewals of other domains, and a couple $100 can go a long way for renewing a smaller portfolio.
Oh, it was not 100, nor was it 1,000. It was more than that.
Oh, I heard $100. Sorry.
Well, no, that's where they start. They start off, offering you a couple nickels. Even sometimes they'll tell you, this is a college project, or the whole story. So we started off in the hundreds and, raised it from there. But
it came through a GoDaddy broker, and a GoDaddy broker gave you an offer of $100?
No. The GoDaddy broker came in after I had dismissed a couple approaches from other avenues.
Gotcha.
For 100. Well, I set my minimum on Domain Agents is where I had it. I set my minimum to 250 just as a bozo filter, so I don't get a lot of nonsense kind of low offers. And somebody tried to initiate conversation through that, and then my registrar has a form where somebody can reach out and contact anonymously the registrant of the domain name without knowing who they are. And so I had received through a variety of different avenues offers in the $150 to $350 range. And I just really didn't respond to those. It didn't interest me. And I don't, I just didn't want to do that. So then I got a bona fide offer from GoDaddy, and that kind of triggered the conversations to move further. So it was the outreach that really triggered my interest in parting with the name. And they came at me in a little bit more significant manner than those anonymous offers.
What kind
So
of
I've
time
got the
frame?
unique perspective of knowing how Jothan negotiates. Did you counter with like $1 million, Jothan?
No, I did not counter with $1 million. I just explained that you know, I work in the industry, and the you know, the name is not purchased with the intent of sale, that it has use, and there's going to be costs to moving from it. And you know, they just came at me with a higher offer, and they did that a couple of times, and it finally was something where I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, it's I realize that's a little bit vague, but you know, it was enough to consider it. So the domain name in question was Doc Watson, and I actually I had it for actually music purposes. But you know, I'm finding right now today that domains in the telemedicine or medical or any kind of telepresence seem to be hotter as far as what people have an interest in.
So can you tell us if it's a 3-figure sale, a 4-figure sale, or a 5-figure sale? It's sort of anticlimactic for you to talk about a sale and not give
I know, I'm all vague. It was in the, it was in the 4 figures, you know, just to be a bit more anticlimactic.
What kind of time frame? What kind of back and forth? Like how much? Like a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months?
No, we got it done in like 3 days. It went really quickly.
What does Doc Watson mean?
Well, so Doc Watson, a few different things. There was a musician named Doc Watson. There was kind of a dentist. This is a Wild West reference for the US back in the days of gunfighting. So there was Doc Watson, who was a dentist, who was a gunfighter.
How does IBM get excited about that?
Well, so if you think in terms of telemedicine, and you think in terms of
yeah, sure.
they have an AI called Watson.
Okay.
So you say Doc and Watson, then if you connect those two, you can see why they'd have an interest in it. So, you know, the domain got acquired. It's immediately been posted and it redirects to IBM. So, you know, it was completely opaque to me who the buyer was. And then, you know, it's only, I just kind of monitor, then I found that it redirects to IBM. That was how I determined that it was IBM.
Good job.
Oh, sorry. Well, since you mentioned IBM, if I ask you whether or not it's CSC Global that contacted you, could you confirm or deny that? Or
It was not. It was not CSC Global.
Okay, because
the actual buyer was opaque, but I know that CSC operates IBM's much of IBM's portfolio, as does Mark Monitor and a couple of the other larger firms.
Yeah, because I had gotten a couple of offers from CSC, but it was so low that I had declined. Which, in hindsight, it's a good thing that I did. So anyway, I don't want to talk more about that, but yeah, so I know about them. You know,
300,000 is my asking price.
301.
That's it.
Well, and I kind of hate. I've heard Braden talk about this too, because he gets some really large sales. But you know, don't you hate when you counter offer and somebody immediately takes it?
Huh.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, there might have been a little bit more on the table. Thank goodness for Mike's programs. I'm a little bit smarter about all this. You know, I invested in domains largely just so that I can talk competently about this stuff at conferences when I'm emceeing, and I just have happened to pick these up across the years. So it's been very interesting that, you know, it's like learning Kung Fu as a kid or something. You know, you have it later in life for self-defense. But I've been trying to hone my skills with the Saiger program at DN Academy to kind of, you know, be able to walk the walk I talk about. And, you know, I learned a lot from all this. So just thought I'd share the happy story about this, though. I mean, it was a nice outcome.
That's congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations, yeah.
Joseph, you're asking about was it the other company, right? Because it's they were the ones who managed IBM's portfolio. Is that it?
Yeah, but you know, they don't confirm or deny. But yeah, exactly, because I'm kind of looking right now at an email. He says, I work for CSC Digital Brand Services, a corporate domain name registrar, et cetera,
Oh, okay.
and we're interested in purchasing, you know, this domain name. And, you know, so, and I engaged them in conversation. They never, but I mean, it was really simple. I mean, it takes you, you know, 30 seconds to try to put that in IBM, and then you will see that the company CSC Digital Brand Services actually works as an agent for IBM, and they try to lowball you, and so I declined, and then they came with another offer, which still, you know, for a company that is the size of IBM, I just said no. And it's a good thing I did not accept that. And now that points to my Twitter page, which was really very helpful in selling some other names, actually.
Joseph, I just looked, you know, after you asked me this question, and it looks like the domain's been transferred to CSC's registrar. So, you know, spot on, my friend, spot on.
Amen. Okay.
Yeah, no, I said that because last year I made probably one of the most interesting sales I'll ever have in my entire domaining life. I don't want to say quite the domain, but it was an incoming offer, and it was by a random person claiming to be, you know, a small broker. Well, I didn't say small broker, but the website was pretty small, and so small, in fact, that it was broken to the point of me being suspicious. So I was like, I kind of figured, okay, this name might be of interest to such and such. So I thought it was exactly that. It was like one of these corporate sort of managers, you know, portfolio managers. And sure enough, it ended up being that. And the sale ended up being a high 4-figure sale that I was pretty happy about. And the name was definitely not something they owned the mark to, but if I had probably outbound to them, it might have been a little bit of an issue. You know, it's one of those ones that are kind of maybe a little bit borderline in some contexts, and it's, you know, it's a name that is open geographically to anybody. But it was, but yeah, I mentioned that because yeah, sometimes these companies try to approach you and they try to downplay who they are, and in my case, they didn't even say the company name. It was a fictitious sort of other company that they tried to pretend to be, but yeah. But congratulations, Jonathan. That's a cool cool thing. Imagine they start using it. They name their next big AI that takes over the world, Doc Watson. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
So speaking of downplaying the name, you know, there's been occasions where I've actually taken where somebody tries to downplay their business and say, I'm just a small business. And, you know, well, you know, maybe this isn't the name for you, I'll say. Maybe you need to get a name that, you know, maybe you need to get the .net or something like that. And going full well, they don't want to do that. Yeah. But, you know, look, if you're small, you know, you're probably not going to be able to afford this. You know, that's fine. You know, I don't need the sale.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty straightforward with that kind of stuff too. But if I get approached by somebody that I know they're not being straight, gloves are off. I'll play your game, and I'll play your game like, you know, and you won't even know what happened to you. You know, I have fun doing it. You know, but it's yeah, because sometimes it's just there's little signs. I don't know. Maybe we should have a discussion that in the future about, you know, little signs to know, you know, how can we tell the difference between somebody who's legit offering $100 or somebody who's really, you know, $100 is their pure offer. Because, you know, honestly, $100 is, you know, a lot of our offers, it's people just, you know, they have an idea and it's like, here's $100, and they genuinely aren't intending to pay anymore. But then there's those companies that, you know, go $300, but, you know, really they're prepared to pay, you know, 10,000 and over. But
I mean, not everyone is a college student.
Yeah.
There's an article on LinkedIn this week from Chris Voss. He's the author of Never Split the Difference.
Yeah.
And the article is entitled "How to Tell If You're, you know, how to tell if the other party is bluffing or not." And what he says to ask them to restate what they just said. And he said, oftentimes you can do that just by repeating the last few words of their message. like if they say, and this is my final offer, then you would say, oh, so are you saying that this is your final offer and that you can't, pay any more than this? And ask them to restate their position. And he says that if they restate their position less strongly the second time around, then they're probably bluffing. But however, if they come back and they double down and they're very strong and clear, just as clear and just as strong as the first time, then he says that it's most likely that that's their real position. So I haven't tried it yet, but I just thought I'd share that with everyone.
Yeah, that's gold. That's really, there's psychology in all of this, isn't it? It's all psychology and just recognizing those key markers. It's such a tool, really interesting.
We should have a psychology of selling section in this. I think that would be really cool.
There's no topic off the table, and as I've said many times, my ideas have started to dry out because whenever there's a quiet moment. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
What do you want to know? What do you want to discuss? Thomas.
Sales psychology. Here we go.
I think Keith's point is a really good one to start with. Is just starting off with an article like that. I mean, that's, to me, that's gold. Just knowing how to ask that question again, and seeing how they respond to it. If anybody else has any more of those type of tips, I mean, I would love to hear that.
I mean, if you want to hear about psychology of selling and some really good tips, I highly recommend to check Rick's blog, the Domain King. He has some really excellent pointers there. And also, now I might have the name wrong, but I think it's Michael Slayer from MicroStrategy that sold Voice.com for $30 million. I mean, I love the way he approached it. And he basically said to the buyer, look, it's like a daughter to me. This name is like a daughter to me. If you think you're going to be able to give her a good home and you deserve it, prove it to me. And the initial offer for Voice.com was, I believe, $150,000. And the seller did not get on the phone until the offer was increased to $20 million. And we can really learn a lot from these. And he basically said this, look, I don't have to sell it. Make me an offer that's going to be really hard for me to refuse. I mean, if you talk about $1 million, $2 million, I'm not even going to get on the phone for that. It's worth a lot more.
Wow.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly.
But that's about knowing what your assets are worth, isn't it? And I mean, he sat on something he truly knows, and it is. I mean, it's worth, oodles of money, but, no one's going to get another one of those. But if someone came to me with a certain amount of money for a domain, I'd be like, oh, let's go. Because, I'm new to this, and it's really hard to judge my, what things are worth. So I think that's key. Knowing your asset value.
Yeah, indeed, but also, the fact that, I mean, he talks about that in the interview, but he said, I didn't really have to sell it. I have like $500 million in the bank, so I don't need another 10 million. Just make it worth my while. Not everybody is like that. I mean, if somebody came to me, I mean, for a domain name that I had that I want 10 million for it and offered me 5 for it, I probably would think about it and say, yeah, but if I had 500 million in the bank,
especially if you paid $10 for it.
Well, still, but again, though, I think that really the teacher about that is indeed Rick Schwartz. I mean, I've learned a lot from him, and in terms of negotiating. So, I mean, I'm talking about that only because somebody said, well, let's have something maybe about the psychology of selling. But I really think that, we can learn a lot from him. And that, I mean, he talks about that in his Rick's blog about being vague, talking about ranges, not giving a specific figure. If you don't hear from the prospective buyer for a week to, or 2 weeks or whatever, don't call because it makes you look weak. I mean, all these things are basic, but I mean, since we're in this business and we don't really want to sell domains for $50 or $100 or $300, I think we can learn a lot from just looking at people that have really made some good money selling the domain names that they own, especially because they focus on the value not the money. It's worked for me, so I can talk from experience.
Yeah, and Joseph is never going to sell a domain for $100 million ever again. That's for sure. but that it's true. And I think the biggest thing isn't necessarily the psychology that you use against, or if psychology is something you can use against somebody, or I don't know. But I found that, look, I'm relatively new to the domain, well, not to domains, but to the domainer industry, to reselling domains. And, you know, with my first year, I made a couple of sales and it was nice. I wasn't quite profitable at that point. Then the next year, I started making a few more sales, getting a little more confident. And then, like, especially last year and a little bit the year before that, you know, my sales have started coming in to the point where, you know, now I know that my portfolio is a profitable portfolio. And when that happens, so some of you are new, it's a magical moment because your confidence just goes way up because all of a sudden, you know, I mean, now I don't have my job anymore because of COVID, but at that point, my domains was a sideline. So it was, you know, anything that was a profit was just like a profit, right? So my confidence was so much higher because I didn't need those sales. And the moment you don't need to make those sales are, for some reason or another, they become so much easier, you know, and it's just because exactly that, the psychology in your own head is you're more confident and you're dealing with the people. It's like, no, when you say no, it's no, you know, it's like, okay, want me to go lower? I'll absorb the escrow fee or whatever it is, but it's not none of this half, you know, I'll meet you in the middle stuff. It's like, no, this is the value. As Joseph said, the value proposition is one of the most important things. And in theory, the more you negotiate it down, the more your initial statement of value seems like you were not serious to begin with.
Exactly.
So, but like for those of you starting, I understand the need to get funds and burn and churn, and that's part of the game too. You know, there's nothing wrong with doing the lower sales at higher volume wholesale approach, you know, if it's working for you.
I think it's important to note, though, that strategy and psychology of sales are different depending on what value tier you're working with. You know, the domains that Rick Schwartz are selling are not the domains that I think most people on social are selling, and differentiating that, and maybe even developing for yourself a strategy for each, you know,
Tier?
dollar range or tier. In addition, I think it's important to note, if you can, the cultural background of your buyer. I've actually looked for years for a book, and there isn't one. Actually, I have someone who we've teased about writing one. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but you know, just Germans negotiate one way, and Middle Easterners have very strong preferences of how they negotiate. And there are many, and no one always fits into a category, but knowing what cultural background you're working with can help you frame, do you need to start high and have a lot of back and forth? Or if you start too high, will they walk away because they don't do haggling? And I think it's a delicate topic, and that's probably why there's never been a book written on it. And like I said, no one always fits into that category or role, but knowing to at least expect a possibility of a certain mindset is going to frame your price and what you say accordingly.
Yeah. So, I mean, for those who don't know, Tess, well, were you the manager, the operator of Media Options, or you're whatever it is, you're head deep in, knee deep in the operations of it. So Media Options is a brokerage that deals in very high end sort of domains. And so, but Tess is I'm sorry.
I saw what Anthony sent in the chat, and I got all excited.
Oh, okay.
So I worked at GoDaddy for many years, and actually that's really where I developed my ideologies about different approaches. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, and then over time, yeah, the more business you do and the more global it is, you just notice and pick up on things.
So,
And
okay, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
no, and I apologize, I didn't realize the time. How long does this social usually go?
Usually, whenever. We end
Couple
when
days.
we end, but yeah,
Couple days.
yeah, we've been gone as late as 11 p.m. Eastern. But you know, we usually stop.
For real?
around- Yeah, sometimes we go on for forever.
You don't have
Whenever
to
it is,
stay the
but
whole
it
time.
dwindles. Like sometimes we'll get down to 15, 10, 15, 20 people, but that's when it's fun as well. It's a little more intimate discussion. But no, my question to you was like, so what is the different approaches when you guys sort of have a larger name?
Hey, Tess, great to see you. It's Paige.
Hi, Paige, how
I
are
think
you?
that the answer is usually 2 hours for the quote official old social. So, you know, if you want to mark it in your book or something like that. But yes, if you happen to come in at 2 hours and 15 minutes, the party will still be going, right, Eric?
Oh yeah.
So,
All right, good to know. Well, I have a call right now,
Okay.
but I'm not going to leave. I'm just going to walk away. Like, I'm not going to exit out. I'll just walk away and I'll come back.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
But first,
Well-
I'm going to copy these links from Dennis sent
No.
one, and I think a couple people sent them. Now I got to go find them.
Tess, you know you can download the whole conversation.
I'll send it to you, Ted.
Oh, that's so adult. Okay.
In cross-cultural negotiations, I think it's not just the cultural aspect, it's also the mechanical aspect. For example, Japanese businesses rely a lot on paper. They can't do business unless you send them a paper invoice, and there's some exchange of paper, and they're relatively unique in that. There are newer books than Kiss, Bow, and Shake Hands that might be a little better. The problem with those books is that they take as their smallest unit the nation as a whole, whereas within nations, there's a lot of times big cultural differences. Southeastern United States, for example, very different from New York City, and it's the same way in other countries. But I do recommend that book, but I would try to go for the second edition or the newer one rather than the first edition.
It's interesting with the negotiations. A few people have mentioned, due to doing a few pitches and things on here, hey, you should do outbounds. And I have to be totally honest and say that it scares the life out of me at the moment. But I was quite heavily involved in negotiations for a big American corporation. And the reason why I'm so intimidated by outbound is because it's not physical. It's not in person. When I'm in someone's space, I can ask them for their kidney. And you know, I just watch their body gestures, their movements. I know it doesn't even faze me. Millions, hundreds of millions of dollars I've asked for in the past, and it doesn't faze me. And I find it so fascinating. But to me, it just becomes a challenge when I see their reactions and things. But when I see it on a computer screen, so much is hidden, and I find that really hard. And I know it's the future now because of COVID and what have you, and technology too. But you know, we would never do a negotiation below $1 million without it being in person. We wouldn't even have the conversation. And that was because we were trained to understand the psychology, the human nature, and the movement of fingers, the lean back of a chair, the right shift of the eyes. You know, all these things are such clear psychology, which you don't get on the screen because they're in their safe haven. You know, they're not in your space. So I find that really hard. So all these books and things are really great, good credit. And I've read many different books, but virtually, I really struggle with it. I don't know if anyone has any tips to overcome those with, you know, going into the outbounding, but that's where I stand.
We're not selling big engineering projects requiring lots of hours to go into it. We're selling something relatively simple. And I think
well, it's more about the monetary value I talk about, you know, asking for that amount of money and watching their reaction, and gauging their reaction. So just, sorry to cut you off, Anthony, but just, it's more about when you negotiate with someone, they give you an offer of X amount, you can then, rather than going back to them and say, okay, is that your final offer? Please reaffirm what you've just told me. And you can watch their body language as they tell you that in person.
Sure.
On virtual, I really miss that because it's a really huge tool for me, for anyone in sales and marketing.
Yeah.
that becomes your toolbox. You just listen and watch, and you just throw bait, and then listen and watch, throw bait, listen and watch. And I don't have that anymore because the human interaction is gone almost. And I really, really suffer with that. I find it quite hard.
Good training would be to take an improv class, not just an acting class, but an improv class where you have to come up with stuff on the fly.
Yeah, and it's also the biggest issue is when you're dealing with emails, one comma can change the dynamic of an entire email.
100%. So much context can be lost in virtual.
And it's like, for those of you who don't know, like I got into domains because I got a domain for a website, and I had a large, very large, tens of thousands of members for DJ club music community many years ago. And people, I would be very, as you guys know, I guess here too, with the social and some of my emails and whatever it is, I can be quite wordy. I could sometimes try to do a little bit less now, but I could overuse smiley faces and things like that. But that was specifically because my audience that I got used to grow my large community back then was international. And I wanted to be as clear as possible for things to be as, or non-disambiguous as possible. Double negative there, but I mean, I wanted things to be as clear as possible. Let's put it that way. And doing so often meant, I had to spell things out a little more detail. And the problem with that is that yes, length does sacrifice some things. There's sometimes people just won't read at length, but my philosophy was always, well, if it's something they care about, they'll read it. And the cost of miscommunication was more than the risk of somebody not reading it or just moving along or whatever it was. But yeah, it's amazing the different, and the responses I got from people all over the world when I was doing that site was amazing. Once you can connect with people who aren't used to connecting with people, in English or in your regular circle, people in different corners of the world who kind of like, they want to connect with other people. It makes a big difference how you communicate. And if you take that extra time to do what I'm doing right now. But yeah.
But with email and that kind of thing, even telephone, you could jot notes when you're not face to face. If you think about it, I understand you're used to that, Adam, but you can also use that time to hone what you're going to say and to, I mean, for me, sometimes it takes me a while to understand the essence of something, and so I have to ruminate on it a bit. So if it may take several minutes or an hour going back to an email, say, well, what if I should probably include this. You can use that to your advantage in a negotiation too.
Yeah, I think it's I'm a very personable person. I like human interaction, and I think it's a whole picture. It's not even with the business or the domaining. It's hit me quite hard, just the whole separation of human elements, if you like, the human nature, human contact, the handshake, the hugs, things like this. It's a bigger picture. But with this element of domaining, I just feel it's taken away my character, and the character is what was so important in my negotiations. And that may come across on these pitches and things like that. My passion is there. But if you met me in person with that, it would just ooze, I'm confident to say. I'm just, it's hard to explain. I think you understand what I'm saying. I don't want
What
to
about a Zoom call? I mean, what about inviting somebody to a Zoom call? Maybe that would be your
sure. I
niche.
mean, Zoom is fine, but I'm still, I can only see your head. I cannot see what your hands are doing. I cannot see your feet movement.
Adam, are you planning to do this with every domain name you have?
No, not at all. I plan to avoid outbounding as much as possible.
All right, here's the thing. If you got something somebody wants,
sure.
Right? And I'll tell you, I don't know, maybe I've said this before. Mm-hmm. The person who cares the least in a negotiation is the person who's going to get the most.
Absolutely. That's the same in any
without
business.
a doubt. So trust me when I say, if they want what you want, they want bad enough to come knocking on the door, not
Yeah.
once, not 3 times, but 10 times until they finally get it.
Yeah.
Whether it's your price or whether it's their price or whether it's in the middle, that's what it's all about.
Very
But
true.
if you're going to try to outbound, hey, it's going to be difficult. As Drew said, you know, when he calls people for towing.com or whatever it is, it's extremely difficult. But that's why these salesmen make a lot of money,
Yeah.
because they're willing to. They've been rejected so many times, and they just move on. They move on to the next prospect.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think I have no issue with.
Of course it is. I
rejection.
made it. No, I'm just joking.
I just want to ask
Adam,
where's
it's Paige.
Hey, Paige.
I will say one thing. I'll say 2 things, actually. If you develop a system that doesn't rely on kind of your natural crutch, which I have too, which is get me in the room with someone, let me read them, let me give them a little
100%.
page, let me, hey, you know what I mean?
Let me spiel them to death.
But if you develop something that is more systemized, you will actually become better at it than someone who thought that they were good at that. You know what I mean? But
Well,
you weren't doing it naturally. You
absolutely.
had to actually research, okay, I have to be something I'm not. How should I be that something I'm not? And you have a chance to actually, by going into that mode, which is different than your natural mode. And the way I did it was I looked at poker players. And if I roll into a poker game as, hey, Paige Howe, oh, hey, that's a great hand, bet, bet, bet. I'm leaving with none of my money, right? Because I'm so easy to read. Everyone else is patient. I'm aggressive. Everyone else is whatever. So I looked at the poker players watching the World Championship Poker, back to this comment of how can we learn from other areas, you know what I mean? And to watch somebody when someone bets 8,000 and you're trying to decide to go all in, or 80,000 or 800,000, and you watch the guys that have the ability to, they're running through the same 10 things in their mind. What could he have?
Sure.
What could I have? What are the potential hands available? Do I want to, you know, stake this hand to be my best one? Then I'm going to flutter my chips 4 times. Then I'm going to shift to my seat once. Then I'm going to ask a question. You know what I mean? And they have a system. And I found for me, responding to emails, I'm better if I go through that same system than I just throw something back that then I'll go, oh, I forgot to check who they were. I forgot to check what I really thought about this name, you know? So I learned that from watching poker players play, that I needed to adapt the same type of strategy that they do on every hand. You know what I mean? Every bet of every hand, they try to respond in the same way. So that was my input.
Well, to speak into that, thank you for that. You mentioned the word systematize. And that right there nails exactly. The human element is removed when you systematize something. Now, I understand what you're saying, and that's spot on, because I'm removing the human element. So therefore, like when you look at the guys playing poker, if they're bluffing, if they're up or down, they've still got those same 10 motions. So you almost can't really suss them out. It's almost like a skill set. They've got those same, you know, they flutter the chips, they do certain motions, whether they're up or down. So if I could perhaps go through and make a list like you say, then absolutely that could work.
But your systems can also bring in your personality. Like I use a lot of PSs when I respond to offers. So someone says, we want this offer, and I say no. And then I may throw in a PS just to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, lighten it up.
You know, boy, these domains are crazy, aren't they? Or something about the topic of the domain, just to try to make it be more like a conversation. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You couldn't just, you can't just, if you have a half-hour meeting booked and a guy says, how much do you want for it? 10,000, that's too high. And in an in-person meeting, there would just be dead space, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in email, you can have it. So I was thinking about Mike's comment, but it was the idea is you can, in your system, try to have strategies that you use to bring out the personality of the other person. You know what I mean? And draw them out in areas other than what do you want to pay or what do you not want to pay? And so that's what I try to do. You know what I mean? And and you never know. Maybe they give away something away, or they just find out that you're a real person and you're serious, and then
That's
you
right.
get to the nitty gritty.
Well, I've actually, it was an Israeli, I can't remember his name now, but if there's interest, I can share it and I'll find out. And it's the language of mail, the language of email or something like that. It's not a book or something, it's just like a document. And it's really interesting how it says sort of, there's three, sort of an opening, a core, and an ending to an email. How you open it should be personable. It should be to the point, but with a flair of person. They can understand you as a person, your approach, and how you like to operate. The core should be about the topic. And the ending should be wrapping it up, being concise, asking for the deal in this situation perhaps, but also leaving it open on the table as well to ensure that they answer back. They have a reason to answer back aside of the offer itself or to close the deal. Because if you don't, the offer's off the table. But if you leave an opening question about something else that could relate to the deal and bring it back, if they do try and bring it off topic, at least then you've got a chain and you can then use that next email as a follow-up email to build, you know, rapport, if you like. And so it's kind of like dragging out the emails, and they say close on the 3rd, open on the 1st, chat on the 2nd, close on the 3rd. And that's kind of what I understood from that. So that was quite interesting. And it's certainly how I'm looking at my language of email and trying to be personable but concise. Like I'll write an email, step away, and then I'll go back to the email and revisit it. Never write an email back on anger or a financial decision immediately. Leave it as long as you can, you know, and that's quite hard to do because at the moment I'm trying to build finances up. But then you can appear desperate, or I can appear desperate, you know, so I am looking at all those things. And to your point, I would like to make maybe a 5-stage, you know, a repertoire of what I go through, the motions. It could be really interesting. But I just wish that human element would come back, and it's going to be a long time. So it's just about building strategies around it right now. You know, it is what it is. There's no point, you know, moaning about it. You know, I just got to get on with it.
You know, I wanted to add to what Paige was saying about developing rapport. I find that is probably one of the most single best things that I can do to improve the outcome of a transaction and to let the other person kind of bring their guard down. You'd be surprised how you could find any number of things to talk about. You know, if you're lucky enough to look at their LinkedIn, maybe you see where they went to college, maybe you see where they live. Oh, you're from San Diego. I love San Diego. Have you eaten at the such and such restaurant? You know, and next thing you know, it's like two friends almost are starting to talk to each other. And then, you know, it's actually, I find extremely helpful to get off topic onto many other topics and then come back. And the other thing I often do is at that point, I mean, I'm usually acting as a broker or intermediary. I'm usually not the, you know, just owner to buyer. I'm usually acting in some sort. So at that point, I can also say, well, you know, at that point I can sort of start to say, well, if I was in your shoes, you know, this is what I would be willing to pay because, you know, your business is going to make this much per year. And, you know, if you use this domain to the fullest extent, you know, I think it would only be worth about this much to you, or this is how I could justify it, you know, but again, any time that you can just make the person laugh, all of those things I think are really, really powerful in making the transaction go well and just, you know, bringing the guards down. And then the next thing you know, they're telling you all about what they really plan to do with the name. And I know one time a guy told me a little bit about it, and then I said, oh, wow, you know, I really resonate with that. I have a similar project, and yeah, and then it just goes really, really easily. And I think you get that human connection maybe that you're looking for.
Yeah, thanks, Kenna. It's valid points, both yourself, Paige, and anyone else that's shared. It's, you know, I closed a $7 million deal once because the guy had a Labradoodle, you know, a little dog. And we discussed that, and we brought it back and we said, you know what, we should probably wrap this up now. I've got to go. And, you know, we wrapped it up and that was the deal done. And he said, you know what, you're a good bloke. And it's just, again, it comes back to that. It's sales 101, you know, find something that they can relate to you on and go straight with that, you know, straight into it. And then bring it back to sales at a later point when you feel comfortable to approach the subject again.
Okay, so it is 4:25 Eastern. We're going to start the auctions at 4:15. So again, we're not going to stop a good conversation because of it, but now it's time. And yes, welcome back and back on topic. So anybody has any other, oh wait, hold on. Tess is here. What were we talking about before? I was asking you a question, but you had to go. It was about the psychology and stuff like that. I was curious if you noticed the difference between the high end and the low end and what it was. I don't know if you have that in your mind or that's kind of gone now, but that was a question I was trying to ask before. Like, because you were saying that I was talking about you being a media option specifically so people would know that you're used to seeing operations and transactions in higher level domains like you know, 6 and even 7-figure domains. At those levels, is there like the negotiations are really like there's no games, it's all straightforward, I'm guessing?
Oh no, everything's a game. No,
I forgot you withdrew. Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter in poker if you're at a, you know, playing for pennies or not. Everybody's got, you know, that's why they're at the table, right? I just think the strategy really needs to be different. There's when they have a lot, basically the lower value your domain is, the more options your buyer has to get something, because say it's three words long, you can reorder those 3 words or use a different word or use a different TLD and maybe even upgrade to only 2 words. So that's why it really makes a difference in your strategy. You have to look at what other alternatives they have.
Yeah. And just so you know, yeah, this is a social. It doesn't matter if somebody's there or not. Like it's you can take a second to or whatever it is.
I need serious training doing Domain Sherpa while I have kids at home. From, you know, school has not been pretty, so they do need some training.
Yeah, well, as long as that doesn't happen during those 7-figure transactions, that's what matters, you know. But
yeah.
Somebody needs your attention, Tess. I can tell.
It's all good. It's all good.
But sometimes that humanity stuff might help. You know, Adam, you're talking about personality and things like that. My wife used to have a resume business, and people would call up on the telephone. And the first question basically they'd ask is, how much does it cost to do a resume? And so instead of answering that question, she would start talking to them. What kind of job are you looking for? Oh, okay, da-da-da-da-da. She started talking to them. They totally forgot what they asked in the first place. They didn't care about the price so much. They cared that she knew what she was talking about. She was going to do a good job for them. She was interested in that. And therefore, the price objection, I mean, it wasn't even a question anymore, even though that was the very first question. So that personality stuff really ends up making a big difference.
Absolutely.
I've got a nice question for Tess. Tess, I own a 2-word domain name, which is a product. I've owned it for the last 20 years, and another firm has got the same domain name with an S at the end of it. I've just discovered that we have ranked #1 on Google for the term, and we're also #1 on Bing for the term. And we've had the domain name a year before they set up in business, but they're a big multi-million-pound business. The domain name, and it's obviously an American business that own the name. We own the name generalfabricator.com, and someone else owns it with the S at the end of it. And we get other emails. How would you approach it?
Yes, you're muted.
Interesting, Tommy. So General Fabricators, good for you. It's a nice, really generic sounding term. You know, how long have they been in business and they've never approached you to acquire the domain?
Never.
Okay. I mean,
we get their emails. We've actually phoned them up once or twice and said, look, we're getting your orders, we're getting your emails. And we had basically a one-page website up. Now we've got about a 7-8 page website up, and we've now beaten them on the rankings for their term. And still got a wee bit of work on it, but I'm looking at Google just now for the term general fabricators, and we're #1 and #2. And when I look at it on Bing, we're #1 and they're sitting at #2. So that tells me that if I was the managing director of that firm, I'd be sitting there going, who are these guys? And the fact that we're in Scotland, you know, it's, if you take one order alone in the fabrication business, it's worth tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands.
It can be, yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you want to be cautious. Certainly, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not legally trained in any way or to give advice, but I do know that on the legal end, you do have to do a dance where, you know, sometimes there can be a block where you don't want to reach out to them for legal purposes and they don't want to reach out to you for legal purposes. So that can be awkward. But I do love the term email bleed. If you ever are in a situation like this, I think knowing that term is powerful because it immediately conveys how painful and what a loss of vitality they are experiencing. You know, because if ever, like I worked with a client once and he was receiving people's social security numbers, people's driver's license, all sorts of private protected information that the correct company could have been sued for. And it wasn't just from external sources, it was even within the company. They would frequently send to the wrong email address.
Yeah, we're getting that. We're getting employees sending in stuff that.
Yeah, but it's a very, very delicate, because if you bring it up to them, sometimes they feel very threatened, or sometimes they really jump to legal because they also recognize how bad that would look if that were in the news or somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So one of my clients even got the CEO's hotel bill.
I remember that.
There were a number of items on there that indicated he had a very busy evening. And, I mean, there are things that companies want to protect, but bringing it up is very delicate. I would say, especially at that level, Tommy, if someone ever reached out to you, I would, and I'm not saying this because I work for a broker, but that's something you want a broker to handle because it gets very, very touchy, where all of a sudden, you know, you want to show them the depth of danger that they're creating for themselves, but whether that's lost revenue, whether that's public embarrassment, whether that's legal HIPAA compliance, whatever, but you want to show them that in a way that doesn't get you sued, attacked, or hung up on.
Yeah, cool. No, I'm just pleased that we've got it, you know, a year before they had it, if you know what I mean. So we had the domain name first, which is, and it's a generic term. So therefore, you know, we didn't know this firm existed until like 10 years later. So yeah, quite pleased.
I agree. And a name like that, the best way to sell it is just to have it, I mean, as long as a lawyer says it's cool, I would list it on Afternick and Dan and, you know, everywhere you can with a buy it now, because the negotiations can get very, very touchy.
Yep.
Jess, I love your term of email bleed, because the term I have used was email leakage, and bleed definitely sounds better, and it sounds, like you said, it sounds painful. Whereas
It
leakage
sounds
just
worse.
gross. Yeah, leakage just sounds gross.
Thanks very much.
No, but it's a good term.
Right. I will say I can't take credit for the term. I just hear it from the brokers in the space. But you're right. It is a really great descriptive term, not like, because it's a loss of strength, a loss of power, a loss of vitality. The essence of who you are is being lost because people are going to the wrong website and emailing information to the wrong place.
Liability too.
There's actually one of the older Sherpas, I think Tess and Chris, where they focused on certain, like the 7 sort of aspects of domains and the importance of having domains. That email bleed was one subject that covered in depth a little bit, and it was a good discussion. So I mean, I would think the best way to approach a company is more like neutral, like saying, oh, by the way, this is, you know, I'm getting this, and not even talk about sales. And if they're going to buy it, they're going to buy it, right? But I don't know.
Yeah, in my experience, they freak out. I don't know why or how. I think that it's almost like telling your grandma, like, you got a text, and they don't understand how it works, and it feels like some bad magic.
Well, it's because somebody is going to get in trouble once that's found out. So
yeah,
either it's somebody
negative,
in
I
the
would
tech or whoever
absolutely
didn't buy that.
never go to a buyer and your opening be, I got this email. You'll
that
get
can, that can look a little bit like you're almost like you're blackmailing them or something too, right?
Yep. You hit the nail on the head, Thomas. That's exactly how they feel. They immediately distrust you, hate you, and don't want to pay you. They want to sue you.
That's good to know.
And then there's other ones that don't even understand the depth of the problem. They're like, oh, okay, I'll get our IT guys on it. Like, no, there's nothing they can do.
My favorite story for whenever it's like, and it's like, there's one time, it wasn't a super important document, but it was like, I don't know, something I was working on and something I needed. And I sent the email to myself. And at one point I had registered arif.org, and I sent that email to arif.com. And, you know, as somebody who owns domains, like it's like, even then, like, if there's one person who should know the difference between a .com and .org, it's a domainer, right? And even then, it's like, you just get into these habits. It's like .com. So yeah, it's always gonna be an issue. And with the S's and non-S's, especially, you know, when it's not natural one way or the other 100%, that's gonna get someone into trouble who didn't think of getting both of them at one point.
Could I ask a practical question about that? I understand you want to be very sparing in letting them know that you've been catching their emails, but how does one do that if you just want to know, are you intercepting some of that? Is it to change the MX records, or how do you go about capturing that email that may be coming in to you inadvertently? Was that?
Yeah, you can use you can use like to set up a catch-all. Like if you only have one or 2 domains and you want to do, you can set up a catch-all for them and just forward all the incoming emails to. The catch-all means it'll take, let's say you own arif.com. So every possible prefix to the @ sign would be caught and sent to whichever one email you want to direct it to. Could be even your own Hotmail account or something separate. But there also are, if you have like a lot of domains, there are services that you can bulk set up your portfolio MX records to these services, and they amalgamate it for you. The reason for them doing that is they use the data itself to sell or to process for spam. So they'll check, like they'll use that data sort of to it's hard. I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how, if any of you guys are aware how this works, chime in. But I know they use that data to sort of process and look through for keywords and try to filter out what's spam and not spam, and then use that to generate blacklists and whitelists for other companies which they resell. But for that, they need a certain number of a pool of, I guess, or probably millions and millions of emails to sort of say, okay, yeah, we're processing these emails. This type of spam comes from this type of email or this type of domain or address, and they'll kind of, use whatever algorithms to kind of spit out a list of what's, safe and what's not safe, relatively speaking.
You have to use one of the services, and has anyone used one of the services that they liked? Is there a name of a service like that?
Yeah, do any of you guys use any of those?
Has it been worthwhile?
Yeah. I'd like to know.
Another thing as well, Bill, is that if you're buying domain names at auction or drop names that someone's already had in the past, if you set up a catch-all account, probably within a couple of months, you might get the password reset for the Twitter account, the Facebook account, the Instagram account, and that if that's already got a built-in audience, then and it's part of the domain there, therefore you just basically take control of it. So setting up catch-all account for every one of your domain names is I would say, a must for domain names that you've bought.
Is there a good service though that, I mean, you mentioned one about as far as if you could do it to your whole portfolio, because I mean, that should be, to me, it seems like that should be one of the first things that you do when you buy a name. Just go ahead and capture it. I mean, what if you can see other prior sales attempts to buy that name? You would have all that
Yeah,
too.
we discussed this in a previous social, whether it was one of the ones I've done or one of Michael's, I'm not sure. And I can't remember if any of the names were listed. I think they were. I know I originally found out about this type of thing. There was an interview on Domain Name Wire, but like we're going back years, like probably 4 years, maybe around when I started. So when I started domaining. So there is an interview where they go into depths and explain the service and, you know, why they have that service and how they pay for it. So they're not using it. They're not making money off of your stuff. It's more of what they sell as amalgamated metadata to like bigger email companies, like I guess Outlook or Google, whatever it is. But I don't remember the name of the service. Sorry.
Another thing also, Arif, is if you buy your names on GoDaddy, you probably have a bunch of forwarding credits. You have to you know, poke around in your My Products, but I think it goes under other products until you activate one, and then it's under email. And then, but you get like 100 forwarding credits with a lot of domain purchases, so you probably have, you know, hundreds of them available, and you can actually set up your DNS record to still point to Dan, but maintain the GoDaddy servers and have a forwarding, and so therefore you have their MX records in there, and you kick in their forwarding, and then you kind of get the best of both worlds. You can have it you can have your name, you have it pointed to a lander at a marketplace, and you also get the emails. Whereas if you just point your name servers to Dan, you don't have that level of control. You wouldn't be able to do a catch-all email at that point.
Yeah, I just saw that Domain Academy, Michael Seiger again. He has actually an article about how to set up the catch-all if anyone's a student there.
So improv on that.
Helpful. Thank you.
I'll put the link. Yeah.
I can tell you guys all about this stuff. I mean, if you have any questions. And Jason, I sent you a note. Dan just added so you can use text records in your DNS to verify your domain. So you can even verify and run your own DNS.
Yeah, I thought I thanked you for that, but maybe I didn't.
Yeah, I saw that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there's a few things to think about when you do the if you do the kind of like email catch-all. There's, in order to not let your domain get dinged for like sending spam or things, because you know, a spammer, a person can put in whatever domain into what they send, and sometimes that can include domains of yours that will receive a response. If you've got a catch-all, then you know there's a realization that the email is not going to bounce. It'll in fact bounce, but it'll come to you. So you'll get bounced messages from other people, and or when it's validated that a response can hit you, sometimes you'll get listed for that domain on blacklists or spam lists or RBLs or things like that can affect, and those can ding the price a little bit. So those can be like like a ding on your credit report kind of thing. So there's something called an SPF record that you can add in DNS. It's complicated, but you can essentially say, this email never sends emails. And that will cause a lot of the mail gateways out there to reject emails that come from the domain that you are managing. And that way it'll keep you from getting dinged on those different lists to get, because you don't want your domain to get onto those blacklists or problem lists. Another thing that only recently I've experienced is there are providers where you can park MX, and they'll put ads into the bounce messages on the responses that they send. So essentially spam the spammer. And those actually can throw off some nickels as well as another alternative like monetization source for your domain. But one thing that's recently come to my attention is that, you know, like a lot of services, you can sign up for a secondary email address on accounts. So you might have on your primary account might be, you know, like your Gmail account or something, and then you can sign up for another one. And one thing that I'm seeing bad guys do more and more is to sign up. They'll find domains that go to those types of services, and they'll sign up for secondary accounts because the links get clicked automatically at those systems. And so that'll actually verify that a secondary email address is valid when it's completely not a domain they own and it's not their email address, but the link gets clicked automatically. And so it'll seem as though you had clicked some verified email address, and then a perpetrator can go out and start to do behaviors and actions logging into systems using a domain name, an email address on your system, and hide behind that. So you end up getting the negative attention from their bad actions. And that can be pretty awful stuff. I'm dealing with a company over in Germany right now where this is the case, where somebody came in and completely tore down a repository on this really popular software library. So you gotta kind of watch what you do and go in open eyes. The GoDaddy has a really good system for this, you know, catch-all. My registrar has good catch-all email. Just if you are just going to receive only, just spend 5 minutes and look at SPF and what that means, and adding an SPF text record, because it'll save you a hell of a lot of grief. I hadn't put that in place on this one particular domain, and it's literally cost me probably 10 to 20 hours of just dealing with shit I shouldn't, pardon me, dealing with some stuff that I shouldn't have had to.
And have you ever written that up? What you just, all this stuff that you just said? I'd love to be able to just read that and maybe include some pictures.
So Andrew Alleman did do this, and it's up on DNWire, but I could make a blog post on my blog, I guess, that summarizes this. I don't like going into describing stuff that's new vectors of bad guy stuff, just because, you know, if you do that, it helps educate bad actors.
Yeah.
Right. So you're always careful and cautious about things like that in the security space. But yeah.
How easy can you turn that back off? If you use that SPF whatever to say, I don't send from this domain, but you're trying to sell the domain, at some point somebody will want to send from that domain. Is that able to, you just click it off, it doesn't have any residue for very long?
So so it's a DNS record. It's basically like a text record in DNS. Without going too science on this,
Sure.
Basically, you just put in a text record and it says @SPF -all or something like that. And then that says there ain't no email coming from me on this. You can easily fine tune it so you can put in the IP addresses if you choose to use email of the servers you're going to send from. But what you really want to do is, if you're going to, you know, prep it for sale or stuff, you can take that record out and it should come out. But a lot of the providers will take and kind of walk and cache those records for a little while. Typically, I would say it takes about a month for those to really kind of get flushed out of those various email systems. But it's typically instantaneous. So good question, Bill.
I think we just found out that there's nothing on the technical side of domains that Jocelyn doesn't know. No, that's gold information.
I totally forgot to do this.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Yeah.
Also, if
really, Jocelyn, like, thanks for helping technically here, but thanks for your always having those answers that all of us wonder about, and just are you know, don't have the technical skills to sort of understand or grasp. And you it's really appreciative that you always share this kind of stuff. It's a real
Stop it.
Yeah.
Stop it. No, I'm here because you guys are all freaking awesome. And you know, none of this exists. And I learn while I'm here, man. Seriously, a lot of you, I learn from you so much. So I'm glad if I can help. Thank you. That was kind of you to say. Thank you.
want to let everybody know that
you.
as an offshoot of a DN Academy Accelerator, we have been doing a Tuesday 1 p.m. Zoom call. And this past week, I went over doing DNS record templates at a couple of different registrars, and a lot of them offer it, but I couldn't show all of them, but I did show GoDaddy and I showed Namebright, and that is available for replay. We don't spread it too wide, and it's not on a public YouTube channel because we do screen caps, and most times I'm mousing around inside my accounts. I don't want stuff being out there for the world to see. You know, I try and keep stuff off the screen as much as possible, but there, you know, sometimes you'll see an address or something that I wouldn't want being too public. But I'm gonna paste my email address in here. Anybody that wants to see the link to that, wants a link to that so that they can watch that and see how to set up your DNS templates at a couple of registrars, and it'll give you the concept that you know might work at a registrar other than those two. I'm happy to share that with you, because in order to do this, if you don't use templates, you would have to do DNS records for every single domain, which is going to be just painstakingly difficult and time consuming. Whereas if you can do a template at a GoDaddy or a Namebright, and I'm pretty sure you can do them at Epic, and I'm sure others, then you know, you can apply that to multiple domains and, you know, kind of do it all in one fell swoop.
Okay. Actually, we had a couple technical questions submitted to me this week. So, and we're kind of talking about that. So I will use that as sort of a segue to these other questions.